In the mid-90s, Paul Verhoeven, also known as the director of RoboCop, was working on a script for a movie called Bug Hunt at Outpost 9. It was a sci-fi war movie, and when it was pointed out to Verhoeven that the script shared a lot of similarities with the 1959 Robert Heinlein novel Starship Troopers, which also won a 1960 Hugo Award for Best Sci-Fi, the studio licensed the book and decided to turn Bug Hunt at Outpost 9 into a Starship Troopers movie. They handed Verhoeven a copy, he read the first 2 chapters, and then quit, because the book was terribly boring and terribly fascist, as he described it. From there, the former Bug Hunt at Outpost 9 went from a sci-fi action war movie to a sci-fi action war scathing satire of its source material, making it truly one of the most unique adaptations of all time. It's such an unusual story behind the adaptation, and I'd like to look at why the book, which again won a Hugo Award, has aged so poorly and is now seen as so problematic, and why the movie was so successful in satirizing the source material. The novel Starship Troopers is nominally a war story about the glory and righteousness of fighting for one's home. It's a product of its time, only about 14 years after the end of World War II, but also after anti-war sentiment started to build after Korea. Still, it comes before that anti-war sentiment bubbled over into a movement and nationwide protest with Vietnam. The story follows Trooper Juan Johnny Rico through his enlistment in the Federal Service, his assignment to the Mobile Infantry, the brutal boot camp that weeds out and kills many of his classmates, his early adventures on the battlefield, eventually officer school, and his first command. It starts promisingly with a strong hook that plays into one of the many sci-fi tropes it sets up, which I'll talk about later. The opening line is, "I get the shakes before every drop." Immediately, you're hooked into this coming action scene. Rico and his unit make an orbital drop onto an unknown planet set to go fight some alien enemies, and you're thinking, okay, this could be a, fun, exciting action war story. And then they just immediately start doing war crimes. Right from the very start, the book is deeply, profoundly up. For the entire 300 some odd pages of this novel, I was looking for reasons why maybe it could have been seen as acceptable at the time it came out, and I just couldn't find any. Many of the problematic assertions that the book makes are, like I said, products of the time, and some of them can sort of be not forgiven in that sense, but you can look at it and understand it and see how, okay, people, brushed by this or it was normal at the time. The book repeatedly emphasizes that corporal and capital punishment are both important. I mean, there's like a 20-page tirade in the middle of it about how we should be hitting children more. Obviously, these days, that's not really considered acceptable. I think the child psychology community would strongly disagree with the benefits of it that Heinlein seems to push, but, at the time, that was more normalized. The book also insists repeatedly that war will never end, not because violence is inevitable, but because imperialism is inevitable. Therefore, nations will always resort to violence to continue to expand. And in a sense, Heinlein wasn't wrong. The global warfare of the early 20th century has been replaced with, proxy wars and intelligence agency coups, but imperialism is still very much an ongoing problem. It's just asserting spheres of influence rather than outright conquering other nations. But still, making that assertion is assuming that, again, imperialism will always exist. And I think the moral philosophers of our current society would argue that imperialism is inherently unethical and that we should be trying to dismantle it. There's a lot of assertions like these that Heinlein makes, that there are certain things that are just facts of civilized societies and they will always exist. And I think through our lens, we would look at these and say, no, we actually probably can change these things, and it's not going to be easy, and it's going to take a lot of pressure from populations, but it's possible. We can, in fact, change the way that the world operates to remove some of the necessity for violence and hopefully in the future all of it. But even all of this aside, the thing that is so insane to me that this was okay at the time is Heinlein's government structure for the Terran Federation, which is the interstellar government that exists in Starship Troopers. In the Terran Federation, only retired military veterans are allowed to vote or hold political office because, according to Heinlein, only veterans know what it truly means to put society before the self. And I don't think anybody is going to argue that that's true now or ever, honestly. I mean, obviously, a lot of veterans do know what it means to put society before the self, and that's why they joined up. But so do a lot of other people that aren't military veterans. Are you going to tell me that Martin Luther King wasn't putting society before the self by getting repeatedly arrested? I mean, come on. What about Gandhi? What about Jesus? I mean, for God's sake. The book never expresses outright that there is any kind of state religion, but it does seem like everybody in the Terran Federation is a Christian. Shouldn't they know that Jesus' entire thing was, peacefully putting the self before the whole? And the thing is, if this was just a component of the excessive military glorification of the novel, it would be one thing, but it's not. The novel portrays its society like a utopia. Everything is working, everyone is happy and healthy and fed. People who have no political power whatsoever, zero agency in their government, seem to still do just fine and have no problem with that. Starship Troopers beats you over the head with the fact that this society is working. In 14 years after World War II, that is an insane thing to claim. I mean, literally, Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini were both veterans of World War I. Did they make the right decisions for society as a whole? What are you kidding me? Like, his entire thesis is just demonstrably false by the most significant global event of the last 2 decades. At the time he wrote the book, it's crazy that people were okay with this. I don't know. I don't understand it. The only thing I can think of is that the military glorification aspect of it was so acceptable and just universally agreed upon at the time that people were like, oh, sure, right, we're not going to criticize that because we would never criticize the military. But that's changed, and we can criticize it now, and I can say to you, this book's political ideas are terrible and crazy. And that is what Paul Verhoeven picked up on very quickly as he was reading this book. Like I said, he only made it 2 chapters and then had one of his co-producers finish it for him to adapt the rest of the script. And I can't say I blame him because all of the problematic politics aside, the book is also just, it's kind of boring. It's very expositional. Most of it is just describing all of this training, a little bit of combat, what it's like to be on a ship between drops. And that could be interesting, but it gives you no reason to really be invested in any of the characters other than the POV character, which is Johnny Rico. And even him, he's not really an interesting or dynamic character. I don't know, man. Maybe I'm being too harsh on the book, but I really didn't think it was very good, even in a vacuum where its politics are acceptable. One final note I feel like I should make on books, movies, and other stories that depict ideas for a society that we disagree with. Because you should be allowed to do this, right? I'm not saying that nobody should ever write a book that presents a new idea for what society could be like, even if it is controversial. And there are ways to depict societies that are outwardly problematic without the theme or the purpose of the work being, let's talk about this type of society and whether or not it's a good idea. But I think that's the reason that I'm so hard on Starship Troopers, the book, because you can certainly argue that the government of the Terran Federation is not the point of Starship Troopers, that the point is that war is hell and maybe some people come out of that stronger, but you can't separate that argument that it makes people stronger and therefore better leaders from the fact that the society it sets up is one where those people are the leaders unilaterally and without any kind of real democracy. And in that sense, it's hard not to read it as an endorsement of the society that it presents. And because of that, it's not immune to criticism. We have to be able to look at it and say, this is a bad idea. But for all the criticism I have, I think Paul Verhoeven in the movie really phrased their criticism of the book better with their satirical film adaptation. In a 2014 interview on the Adam Carolla show, Michael Ironside, who plays Lieutenant Razchak in the movie, which is a combination of the characters of Lieutenant Razchak and Colonel Dubois from the book, Ironside talks about a conversation he had with Verhoeven about why he was making this movie that is ostensibly about right-wing fascism. Verhoeven had grown up in Nazi-occupied Netherlands, so obviously this is a little close to home for him. And Verhoeven's response, as Ironside relayed it, I think hits pretty close to home on why this satire worked so well. And I'm paraphrasing here, but essentially what Verhoeven said is that if I just make a movie that's saying to people fascism is bad, then, nobody's going to listen. Nobody's going to watch it. But if I make a movie about this society that shows fascism as shiny and working, but make it ridiculous, add some elements that show what's wrong with this picture, then it's a good satire. The direct quote is, "I'm going to make a perfect world. Everyone is beautiful, everything is shiny, everything has big guns and fancy ships, but it's only good for killing bugs." And I think what's so interesting about this is that the book is so close to just being a satire of itself. Again, if it presented this society as a dystopia, or if it did anything that was not completely and totally earnest, you could kind of take it as a critique of the society that it sets up. But again, it doesn't. It just repeatedly says, yep, this is working. This is fine. It's all great. So what Verhoeven did was take that society, turn it into a movie, turn this story into a movie, turn this war story into a war film, but portray everything in this kind of sarcastic tone with really in-your-face fascist Nazi imagery. The uniforms that the soldiers wear in training and in recreation are pretty directly lifted from the Wehrmacht. The symbology is very close to the Nazi use of the eagle. I mean, if you look at Neil Patrick Harris's portrayal of Carl later on in the movie, once he's become a colonel after less than a year somehow because he's psychic in the movie, it literally just looks like an SS officer. It's crazy. But everything has this just campy, corny, stupid tone to it, and that's what makes it work as a satire. He's presenting to you pretty much exactly the society that Heinlein laid out, with a different story that's compressed a little and adapted to work on the screen, but everything is just kind of dumb. And really, you could be forgiven for watching this movie without knowing about the book and just thinking, this is a stupid, campy sci-fi movie, but everybody's Nazis for some reason. Why did somebody make this? But with the full context of the book, the message that Verhoeven seems to be trying to sell to the audience is, hey, look at this. This author said it's all shiny and it's all working. Guess what? It's really stupid. And really, I think there's no better way to make fun of a society that portrays itself as the pillar of moral uprightness, and everything they do is righteous and for the glory of humanity or whatever. They're just saying nah, this is dumb. We're just going to show exactly what they're doing, but we're going to act really stupid the whole time. And it's just everything about the movie, down to the way that it makes jokes, down to the tonality and the way people speak, where everyone is taking everything too seriously, or the way that they actually conduct warfare, where it's literally just hundreds of dudes in armor with big guns running directly at these bugs. There's no tactics or strategy or use of cover or anything. They're just running around shooting in giant packs. It's oh god, the whole thing is just so dumb. It's such a stupid movie, and that's what's so beautiful about it. And it was so cathartic after reading this book to look at this and just be like, thank you. I am glad that I am not the only one that read this book, this whole daggum thing. It was just this is so dumb. All of this is so stupid. And look, there are some positives to take away from the book. It invented a lot of sci-fi tropes that have remained used and influential throughout a lot of our modern sci-fi, like orbital drop troopers, space fascism, power armor. The world building in it is interesting, if lacking in detail in certain areas that at least I would have liked to see more personally. Again, as crazy as it sounds, and I know I keep saying this, I could see a way that somebody read this book in 1959 and thought, this is a good book. A lot of it is just difference in how sci-fi is constructed. A lot of it is things that have become unacceptable to our society that were acceptable at the time, but still there's some parts of it that I'm just how was anybody okay with this, even in 1959? And because of that, I'm so glad that the movie was made, because by God, did we need a good satire of this. Thank you so much for watching. I'm trying something new with the format here, a little more face-to-face, a little more personal, and it allows me to be a little less serious, which I think there's a balance to be struck somewhere in the middle, and I'm going to try to find that as I continue to iterate on this idea that I've been working on over the next few months here. Plus, you get the fun benefit of me being quarantined in my childhood bedroom due to COVID circumstances, so, you get a nice little background to look at. If you like this format, leave a comment. Let me know if you think you would like to see more video clips from the film or the TV show that I'm talking about included. I can work on that and let me know. Like I said, there's going to be some iterating here, and I'll try to continue to improve it in a way that people want to see. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe. Over the next few weeks, I'm going to be talking about the Percy Jackson series as well as its 2 film adaptations, which I haven't seen, but I have not heard great things about, so that's going to be interesting, but it will give me a lot to talk about, which is always fun. And one of those topics will certainly be what Disney can hopefully do better with the new Disney Plus series that they're developing now. Percy Jackson was definitely my favorite series from my middle school years, and I would really love to see it done justice on the screen at some point. And that about wraps it up. So thank you again for watching, and I'll see you next time.